Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad NAFIS bin ABDUL, metric number 073260. So in this video, our group going to discuss about religion and reason according to Kant. According to Immanuel Kant, first thing first, religion is not based from logical reasoning or philosophical proof alone. Instead, religion arises from a human sense of moral obligation or duty. It's like we need God because moral life requires the idea of God as its foundation. Kant also argued that human reason has clear limits. Logical argument about God can never be reached absolute of understanding. So, Kant reject the attempt by theologians to establish religion entirely on theoretical reason. Okay, also about nature appear orderly and beautiful. Kant also insists that nature cannot serve as decisive proof of God's existence. Nature also contains suffering, chaos, and destruction. So, arguments based on natural order are weak and should be abandoned according to Kant. Okay, next, the foundation of religion is morality according to Kant. For Immanuel Kant, religion must be grounded in practical morality. The true purpose of religion is to guide how we act, not to engage in metaphysical speculation. So, moral practice is more important. He also maintained that sacred scripture should not be accepted blindly. Instead, they must be evaluated according to their moral value, such as whether they promote justice, goodness, or humanity. This view was highly radical during Kant's time. Kant criticized religion formalism by stating that doctrine and ritual are meaningless if they do not lead to moral action. Without ethical behavior and genuinely virtue, religion becomes nothing more than empty symbols. So in the other hand, Kant explained that true religion unites humanity through a shared and universal moral law. It does not divide people into sect, parties, or faction. Moral principles serve as a common language for all human beings. For Kant, the true church is not physical building. It is a community of morally committed individuals. This moral community reflects the original mission of Christ. Kant strongly warns that religion must never become a tool of political power. When religion is controlled by the state, it loses its moral spirit and becomes a means of oppression. Kant observed this danger clearly in Prussia during his lifetime.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad KHUWALID bin Ali, matric number 073089. Okay, this slide show how Kant's religious ideas were conceived by the Prussian government because they were seen as threatening religious authority. To avoid a censorship, Kant published his book in Jena outside Prussian control. He was accused of undermining Christian doctrine due to his emphasis on reason and moral autonomy, and he defended the freedom of scholar in religious matters. However, because of political pressure and his old age, Kant agreed to remain silent during the king's reign. Overall, this case highlights the conflict between intellectual freedom and political power. Okay, next slide. I will explain Kant's political view and his idea of perpetual peace. Kant was accused of religious and political heresy because his ideas challenged traditional authority. The French Revolution shook European monarchies and Islam rulers, including those in Persia. While most Prussians Scholars supported the monarchy. Kant did not support absolute rule, especially when it limited freedom and moralism. He welcomed the revolution as a sign of moral progress, despite criticism its violence. Well, can believe that freedom, moral progress, and rational law are the foundation of perpetual peace. Okay, this slide explains Kant's view on conflict law and historical progress toward perpetual peace. Kant agreed that conflict is necessary for human and social development because it derives improvement and organization. Laws then transform conflict into an ordered civil society. He also explained that states behave like individuals in a state of nature, often competing and mistrusting one another, which lead to war. However, can believe that history moved toward perpetual peace through a hidden plan and nature, where even conflicts push humanity towards stronger laws and cooperation. Overall, for Kant, peace results from moral progress, rational laws, and historical development, not simple the absence of conflict.
The burden of standing armies. Ladies and gentlemen, let us begin with Immanuel Kant's bold critique of militarization. Kant observed that nations dedicate almost all their resources to preparing for future wars. He argued that true civilization is impossible as long as standing armies exist. Why? Because these armies create a limitless rivalry between nations. Ironically, the cost of maintaining such a huge army making peace financially heavier than a short war. This leads nations to start offensive war just to relieve themselves of this economic burden. Colonialism and hypocrisy. Kant did not stop at criticizing armies. He also attacked the root cause of war, which he saw in European colonialism. He compared the expansion of European powers in America, Africa, and Asia to thieves fighting over spoils. He pointed out the deep hypocrisy. These nations claim to be pious and godly, yet they drink injustice like water. When they discovered new lands, they treated the indigenous inhabitants as if they didn't exist, simply to conquer and exploit them. Kant believed this greed stems from oligarchic system where only a few benefit from the spoil of war. Conditions for perpetual peace. So, what is the solution? Kant offers his famous prescription for perpetual peace. The first essential condition is that the civil constitution of every state must be republican. The logic is simple. If the decision to go to war requires the consent of the citizens, who are the ones fighting and paying for it, they will be very hesitant to choose war. However, in a non-republican state, the ruler is the owner of the state, not a citizen. For such a ruler, declaring war is as easy and painless as deciding on a hunting trip because he suffers no personal loss in his palace. human dignity and equality. This political view is rooted in Kant's ethic. He believed the government's purpose is to aid individual growth, not to exploit people. His core principle is that we must respect every individual as an absolute and in themselves. Using a human being merely as a tool or means for another purpose is a crime against humanity. Therefore, Kant called for equal opportunity for all to develop their talents, rejecting hereditary privileges, which he saw as merely the result of past military conquest. Kant's final years. Kant was not just a philosopher in theory, he lived his principles. Even in his old age, when Europe was turning against the French Revolution, he remained a staunch supporter of democracy and liberty. As time passed, physical weakness and senility eventually overcame him. In 1804, at the age of 79, Immanuel Kant passed away quietly, falling like a withered leaf in autumn. Critique and legacy. We conclude with his legacy. The edifice Kant built spanning logic, metaphysics, ethic, and politics has withstood a century of criticism. Critics may attack the details, but the foundation remains solid. One major area of debate was his theory of space. Kant argued that space is a mental form we use to organize our sensation. While debate, his insight remained profound. We cannot perceive anything in the external world without a concept of space. Kant critically Kant's critical philosophy truly changed the direction of human thought forever.
Okay, next we go to Kant on space, time and truth, page 232, where Kant argues that space is not something perceived through senses, rather it is a mental form used by the human mind to organize sensory experiences. For example, the Earth rotation around the sun takes place in space, yet space itself cannot be perceived directly by the senses. Therefore, the claim that humans receive spatial sensation and then construct the concept of space through reason is incorrect. Instead, the correct answer is that we perceive space at the very same moment we perceive sensory objects. The same applies to time, where where it is not merely subjective reality, but an objective reality that exists independently of human awareness. A tree, for instance, grows, matures, bears fruits, then withers and disappears, whether or not we perceive it. Kant attempted to establish proof that space is subjective and lack independent external existence. However, his argument arises from philosophical confusion because affirming the objectivity of space leads to the implication of God existence in space, and existence in space implies materiality. And what is noteworthy here is that modern science has arrived at conclusion similar to Kant's regarding space and time. The theory of relativity affirms that absolute space and absolute time have no independent existence. Rather, they exist only when objects and events exist, meaning that they are a form of sensory perception. Kant's approach to absolute truth is also evident in his discussion of certainty and convictions. He held that absolute truth free from doubt is unattainable, and that human knowledge is confined to probability and conjecture. Consequently, Modern scientific research has reinforced this view, leading to the belief that all sciences, including pure mathematics, are relative in their truth and do not attain absolute certainty. Page 233, Kant's theory of knowledge and the mind. One of Kant's greatest contribution was his argument that humans uh, do not know the external world except through the senses, and that the mind is not a blank slate passively receiving experiences. Rather, it is an active agent that selects sensory data, organizes it, and constructs mental representation from it. However, a question arises: do these mental representation already exist in the human mind before sensory input from the external world? And empiricists argue that this may be true for some individual, but not for humanity as a whole, since mental representations are acquired from external experiences. Others argue that these representations are merely habitual modes of thinking, formed gradually from sensation and that form sensory perception. Once humans acquire the capacity for reasoning, they are able to distinguish between sensory perception and intellectual perception. According to this view, memory defined as stored sensory images derived from repeated external experiences, organizes and connect sensations, transforming them into sensory perception and then into ideas. Thus, the unity of reason attributed by Kant is not innate but acquired, and it may also be lost as observed in certain mental disorder. Accordingly, all human intellectual perceptions are self-produced and not inherited by nature. Critics also examined Kant's moral theory. They rejected his claim that morality is absolute and innate. Proponents of evolutionary theory argued that moral consciousness does not arise from pure rational principles, but rather from social customs and communal rules. From this, from this perspective, morality is not inherently embedded within human nature, but is instead the final outcome of social development. Okay, next we go to page 234, which is criticism of Kant's ethic and religion. Ethics, according to this view, develops over long periods of time and is not universal or absolute. Rather, it is a system of behavioral rules suited to the life of a particular society, changing with shifts in circumstances and environment. For example, individual self-interest may be considered morally harmful in a society engaged in warfare, yet regarded as beneficial in a peaceful and secure society as a means of progress and productivity. Kant also revised his position in his later critical writings after nearly denying the existence of God, free will, and the immortality of the soul in his earlier works. He later reaffirmed this concept. One critic remarked that Kant's, Kant's writing resembled a marketplace in which philosophical concepts such as free will, immortality of the soul, divine unity, atheism, and faith are displayed as commodity that can be derived from the concept of moral obligation. Although Kant was sincere in his intellectual integrity, he feared that denying religious belief might undermine the moral foundation of society. Consequently, he attempted to reconstruct a moral theology to support ethical values, albeit on purely rational grounds. But nevertheless, Kant's, Kant's defense of faith was considered weak as he rejected rational proof for the existence of God. In his discussion, uh, religion, in his discussion of religion within the limits of pure reason, Kant demonstrated deep sincerity and strong personal conviction. In a letter, in a letter to one of his friends, Kant wrote that he often reflects deeply on many matters and is convinced of their truth, yet lacks the courage to declare them openly. Hence, it is not surprising that a person may state something without fully believing in it. Okay, next is page 235. There were differing opinions about Kant's view uh, among those who fail to fully grasp the greatness of his message due to the completely and due to the complexity and depth. After the publication of this book, materialists openly declared that the Critique of Pure Reason was an attempt by Kant to shake certainty in knowledge. Skeptics said it is an empty claim through which he tried uh, to build a new form of religious rigidity upon the ruins of the new system. Those who believe in what is beyond nature said it is an ingenious attempt to defend the foundation upon which religion is based to establish the naturalist school. And the naturalist said it is a new pillar for the philosophy of faith that had been destroyed. Materialists argued that uh, it promoted idealism and denied the reality of matter, and spiritualists uh, said that it is an unjustified limitation of truth and its confinement entirely within material bodies. In reality, the greatness of the book lies in its appreciation of all intellectual perspective, its recognition of the merits, and its effort to reconcile and fuse them all into a single coherent unity. Philosophy had never been so productive in all its eras as it was in its modern age.